Hi, welcome to the Great Northern Cascades division in N-Scale. I want to do a little bit of a JMRI series, so the Java Model Railroad Interface. It's a way that you can run a little mini computer, connect it into your network, and then you can start to do a bunch of things from your computer, or you can control your whole layout from your smartphone. So in this first video, we're going to look at some of the different ways you could run JMRI, different computer options that you can use, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to download something that'll let it run onto a little mini computer called a Raspberry Pi. So you might have heard of those. They're fairly small, fairly cheap little computers that you can get, and they're perfect for running JMRI because you don't need to have a whole lot of computer power. You're not going to run any other applications on it. You're not going to watch YouTube and things like that on it. It's just something really small that will sit under your layout somewhere, and it will just run this for you, and there's not really anything else that you have to think about. Other videos that we have coming up will then show how we can connect into our Digitrack system, which is what we're running here at Great Northern Cascades Division. But JMRI works with NCE, it works with LENS, it works with ESU. There's dozens of different DCC systems that it works with. I have used it extensively with NCE for a number of years in the past. I just happen to be running Digitracks right now. So we'll have a look at how we can do that, and then another video we're going to look at how we can then control everything from the smartphone. And again, there's not a lot of computing stuff that you need to know about this. I do work in computing, I will give that disclaimer, but it really is fairly straightforward. Once you understand how these different components work, there's really not a lot of configuration that you have to do for this. So hopefully you enjoy this first one where we actually look a little bit at JMRI and we get it ready to run on a Raspberry Pi, and then do subscribe and follow along so you can check out those other videos on how we can then get this whole layout up and running and start to run some trends. Thanks for watching.
So let's start and talk a little bit about what JMRI is. So it's a suite of applications that you can install on your computer, and stands for Java Model Railroad Interface. Java is some development language that you can run, development kit that can run. So it's really just the language that this thing's written in. So if we take the Model Railroad Interface, what that then means is we have things like Decoder Pro, Panel Pro, Dispatch Pro. There's a whole bunch of different things built in that let you do things like Decoder Pro is programming decoders. So rather than having to punch in a bunch of numbers on your handset for something like Digitracks or NCE, you can do it through a computer application. That makes it a little bit easier, a little bit more visual. And especially when it comes to things like giving names to functions, when you want to change some of the values for things like acceleration, deceleration, changing momentum, different speed settings, doing it through an application on a computer, to me, is a little bit easier at least. But then there's things like Panel Pro, where you can literally draw out a panel of what your layout would look like and where your different turnouts are and where your signals are. Operations Pro is where you can have a roster of the different rolling stock that you have, the locomotives that you have, how you're then going to start to dispatch things through Dispatch Pro. So there's a whole bunch of different cool things that you can do. And it lets you then connect in through different throttles as well. So you can install applications on your smartphone, like Engine Driver, for example, on an Android phone. And then without having anything special in terms of like a wireless system for Digitracks, people can then show up and they can use their smartphone, they can connect via JMRI, and they can start to run trends. They can throw turnouts, they can throw routes, which would be a collection of different turnouts. So it's a pretty cool way of doing it. So all the way on the bottom here and on the left-hand side, we can go into Setup and Installation. And if you want to install this on a Windows, Mac, Linux machine, you can go ahead and do that. And they have instructions for that. I'm going to run it off a Raspberry Pi. And what's a Raspberry Pi? You might have heard of that. The little mini computers. And so there's a few different versions available. This one is literally a keyboard, but it has stuff built into the back of it. And so that's one option that you can run. These are some of the more common ones. It's a little board. It's a little bit bigger than a credit card, and it has some different ports on it. And it is kind of very bare bones. And so, you know, the idea is a little bit of a tinkerer with electronics maybe and stuff like this. It used to be before COVID pandemic that these were really accessible. These were like $35, $40. They're about, I don't know, 25 to 35 pounds in the UK. I don't know. Convert your local currency. But they were readily accessible. And the whole point of them was that they were meant to be fairly cheap little boards that you could get started with. Because of the COVID pandemic, these can still be kind of hard to get to, but there's a bunch of different ones. I actually have a slightly older Raspberry Pi 3. Still works great. So this is what I'm going to do, but there are other options. So for example, there's little mini PCs that you can get. So I actually have one of these for something else, and I might end up using this down in the layout. This is a company, it is a Chinese company, so take that as you will. But they make these little mini PCs, and these are maybe about the size of a smartphone, a little bit thicker than a smartphone, but about that kind of size. And they run full version of Windows, or you can install Linux on them. And they have network ports, they have USB ports, things like that. These run anywhere from about 150 US dollars up to maybe 250 US dollars, depending on how much memory and CPU power you want, how much storage space you want. But you can also just straight, you have an old machine, you have an old laptop, or you go out and you get an old laptop on eBay or from a local PC store or something like that. You can absolutely just install this straight on Windows, Mac, or Linux. No problem with doing that. So I'm going to do it on Linux. That runs on Raspberry Pi. And so there is a guy called Steve Todd, and he's been doing this for quite some time now, but he basically provides a pre-built version of this that you can go ahead and use. And so this then is a really quick and easy way to get JMRI running on a Raspberry Pi without having to mess around with a whole bunch of computer stuff and Linux stuff at all. I've been running this on the previous layout that I had for about 5 or 6 years, and he keeps this up to date somewhat regularly, but honestly you don't actually have to update it unless you need to. But he's got a little picture of what a Raspberry Pi could look like, and he does give some ideas of where you can go and get this, but again, they're kind of hard to get. But download, this was last done October 25th, so when I'm recording this, this is less than 3 months old, so that's pretty cool. And he does give instructions as to how you can go ahead and do this, and he gives ideas of how you could connect to this if you're using Android phone. He also then talks about how you can do from an iPhone. He then gives details on what some of the things that he's done in terms of pre-configuring this if you're worried about security and stuff like that. But really what it does is it turns JMRI into its own little mini computer. Raspberry Pi running its own mini computer, your JMRI running on this mini computer. It then is providing its little wireless network for you as well, so there's nothing else that you have to do. And it's all set up right out of the box for you. So I'm going to go ahead and download this. It does take you over into Google Drive. You don't need to have a Google account to be able to do this, but you'll go ahead and do this. It says you can't scan for viruses. So once you get it onto your local machine, if you want to scan for viruses, you certainly can do. This is just saying that, hey, this is too big for Google Drive to be actually able to scan this for you. This is 1.4 gigabytes, so depending on your internet connection, it might take a little bit of time. It's probably going to take me a couple of minutes. So I'm going to pause the video and then we'll come back once this is finished downloading. Alright, so the download of that file has finished, took a couple of minutes, and then I've opened up Balana Etcher, which is a little application on the computer that lets me basically write that file that we downloaded, that image file that contains all of the Linux stuff, all the JMRI stuff, all the configuration, writes it out to a micro SD card, and then we can just pop that micro SD card into the Raspberry Pi. So if you're putting JMRI onto a Windows machine, a Mac machine, Linux machine yourself, just follow the instructions on the JMRI website. You don't need to be doing this part. So we're going to go ahead and flash from the file. We'll go to downloads and we'll pick that Raspberry Pi JMRI file that we had. And it's actually going to do something called streaming. Like, we downloaded a small kind of Kickstart 2 down, small as 1.4 gigabytes. It actually ends a little bit bigger than that once it actually writes it out. So we're going to go ahead and we've got just the one option. Make sure that you don't pick something like this. This is the system drive. This is your C drive where Windows is. I've got my micro SD card connected, so make sure that you pick this. And actually, it should be smart and it should tell you, hey, you really don't want to do this. So we'll go ahead and it says, okay, flash. Right, so if you're on Windows, what you might do is get a prompt that killed my video recording saying, are you sure you want Windows to go ahead and run this application? And what it's now doing is taking that Kickstart file, that 1.4 gigabyte image file that we had, It's streaming down the rest of it because it's about 8 gigabytes in total is what it needs, and then it's writing that out to that micro SD card. So it thinks it's going to be another 5 or 6 minutes or so going ahead and doing this. Again, depending on how fast your internet connection is, it might take a little bit longer. It's got about 8 gigabytes to download. It'll write it to that micro SD card. So we'll come back and see when it's done. We just go ahead and pop that into Raspberry Pi, and then that's it. Everything will be up and running and configured for us. Alright, so this is just wrapping up now. This is right at the end. We'll go through and now do a validation step as well. And again, this will take a few minutes, and really all it's doing is making sure that what it's downloaded and then put out to that memory card is good to go, so that when you put it in the Raspberry Pi, you don't have any problems. So we'll let it finish this validation, again, 6-7 minutes or so, and then we'll pop it over to the Raspberry Pi. And here is that validation step just finishing up now. It says, okay, we're all done. And so at this point, we can now take out that micro SD card and pop it into Raspberry Pi and get up and running. So again, the last 2 or 3 minutes you won't have to do messing around with downloading from Steve Todd, flashing to a micro SD card. If you're using a Windows or a Mac computer and you're just wanting to download JMRI straight from the website, you can absolutely go ahead and do that. But check out the next video where I'll then start poking around within JMRI on that Raspberry Pi, see how we can connect in that Digitrax command station, and then see how that wireless network that's on the Raspberry Pi through Steve Todd lets you then connect straight in from a smartphone and start controlling trains right from there without having to use that wireless throttle from Digitrax.
Alright, so now that we have that image on the micro SD card, down into the basement, plug it in, and see it running in the Raspberry Pi. So check out the next video where you'll be able to see that all in action. Thanks for watching this one. Take care. Bye-bye.